Now, when it comes to learning palmistry, it can be a bit of a minefield. Which books should I buy? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you my personal top 10 favourite books on palmistry. And these are the books that have helped me learn tremendously over the years. There are many different schools of thought on the subject. There's Chinese palmistry, Indian palmistry, there's Western palmistry. And those are just to name a few, but those are the three main ones, I suppose. I'm more of a modern, if you like, Western palmist, although I like to take into account all schools of thought. Now, there were lots of books in my collection that didn't quite make this top 10, and I'm not going to lie to you, this was difficult. But my number 10 is Mir Bashir, The Art of Hand Analysis. Now, Mir Bashir was a huge palmist in the 60s and 70s. Perhaps even in the 50s, he taught my mentor, T.Stokes, and Mir Bashir really changed how a lot of people thought about palmistry over in the West. His background is, as you might imagine, Indian. He's written a few books. They've all been sort of translated, and the language is quite sort of difficult to understand because I think some of the meanings have been lost slightly in translation. But this book is particularly good because it's very concise. It shows you lots of different sort of diagrams. You can see and very clearly understand the meanings behind, you know, all of the explanations shown. I personally find this book very good for when I need to look at a specific kind of isolated palmar marking and get an idea behind the meaning of it, or at least to begin to understand the nature of that marking. This book is particularly good for these kind of more isolated palmar markings, and it's a bit of a crossover from the Indian school of thought to the Western. Mir Bashir had a strong influence over the SSPP, I believe it stands for the Scientific School of Practicing Palmists or something like that, and really influenced the early kind of emerging modern palmists. That's a bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? Really, it was the era where medical palmistry was just sort of taking off. Now, next we have The Art and Science of Hand Reading by Ellen Goldberg and Dorian Bergen. Now, this book is a bit of a one-size-fits-all. It's kind of everything you need to know. It's packed. It's got lots of illustrations and diagrams, as you might imagine, but it's very easy to understand at the same time as having a lot of information in it. It's a great book, great read, well worth the money. It's got a lot of clear photographic illustrations in it as well that relate to the context of what's being described. It's got all the information you would expect from a beginner to sort of intermediate palmistry book, with all of the explanations of all of the mounts and the lines, the history of palmistry. It does kind of lack what I want from a palmistry book, and that's case studies, really, to put things into context. But if you're a beginner, this is an excellent book. I highly recommend. It's thorough, it's comprehensive, it covers areas of palmistry which many books fail to, fingerprints, the fact that palmistry is much more about health and character analysis, and how knowing yourself is an extremely powerful tool, an art form that we seem to have lost in particularly Western society. Also, it's just such a hardy book. I mean, it's, hardback, you're not going to get it in paperback. It's going to stand the test of time. It's a marvellous book. Now, number 7 is Medical Palmistry by Eugene Scheimann, MD, and Nathaniel Altman. And this really, as I was saying earlier, the kind of beginnings of medical palmistry in the 60s and 70s that Mir Bashir had such a great influence on. This is kind of one of the descendants of that. It's powerful because medical practitioners are really validating and promoting the efficacy of palmistry. There's many real-life case studies which are all explained in great detail. It's not just physical health, there's mental health explained here as well, and how the palm can show these signs. On a level of skin ridge patterns, fingerprint patterns as well. So dermatoglyphics, which is a relatively new area of palmistry, only about 400 years old, and the pair go really quite deep into this topic, how to not diagnose as such, but how to see the signs or the beginnings of diabetes, cancer, bone issues and diseases. What I find really helpful about this book is you can just flip straight to the back, have a look at the index, find a particular disease or health issue, and find out how the palm shows this. It shows how the palm shows stress and how the body is affected by that in relation to it. It just brings it all together in such a neat way, and it's just a really reliable book in terms of health. It does also go into explaining character types as well, but I think it's marketed as though it's a doctor's guide to better health through hand analysis. I think the one warning I would provide to people who want to understand a bit more about medical palmistry is not to diagnose by one sign or symptom alone. Now I'm going to move on to number 6, which is Your Palm, Barometer of Health by David Brandon-Jones and Veronica Bennett. Now, David Brandon-Jones was a contemporary of T.Stokes as well, and also taught and worked alongside T.Stokes. David Brandon-Jones said that Terry was better than him, and Terry said the same about David. I think they were both being quite modest, and truthfully, I think in many ways they were very, very different palmists and added to the field of palmistry very different things. Now, this book goes into incredible depth into the structure of the hand itself, the even more perhaps than medical palmistry. David Brandon-Jones and Veronica Bennett go into such extreme detail. They talk about how the area of palmistry as a whole relates to other areas of an anatomical, there we go, that's the word, study. So reflexology, acupuncture meridians, the relative motor and sensory representation in the human cortex, but also the structure of the hand as a whole, right from the bone structure to the muscles, the tendons, the veins, and more than that, but also how all of this information relates to the rest of the body and how palmistry can help us by having a better understanding of anatomical study. It has all of the medical terminology for the areas of the palms and the lines of the palms themselves. There's lots of conclusions in this book with relevant sort of throwbacks to the early scientists in the turn of the 20th century with Dr. Charlotte Wolfe, Dr. Gustav Carl Jung, Benham, William G. Benham, all of the early, palmists that really shaped and changed things. There's lots about dermatoglyphics in this book, which is particularly helpful because not that many books have all that much newer insights into this. You won't find books going into this kind of detail into the skin ridge patterns. I suppose the downside to this book is it's not for the beginner, and it's so in depth that you can kind of get lost in it a little bit. And if you're just looking for a quick answer, it's not really the book for you. It's really for the palmistry nerd. So number 6 is Palmistry for Today, a very early 2000s title, and I believe it was published around that time. And it's by Frank C Clifford, and it's an excellent book. I still refer to this book today many times over. It's just something you can quickly refer to, find out what you need, and move on. It's particularly good for understanding the hand shapes. There's lots of clear examples of different types of palmar markings, headline heartline, lifeline markings. There's lots of case studies of celebrities in here, which you're not going to find online. You've got lots of different people in here, and it shows how what the hand says about those people, and how that's relevant for our learning process as budding palmists. I particularly like this book for the chirognomy aspects of it, which is often missed in a lot of palmistry books, and there's a great deal of information here to learn from. And I think the reason why this is often forgotten in a lot of books is because most books are just sort of rehashing older works. And the entire kind of message of the book, the idea, the aim and the goal of the book is to put you on some sort of course so that by the end of it you have a good understanding of palmistry and how to read palms yourself. And I certainly think that if you bought this book and this book alone, if you had a little bit of understanding about palmistry, then this would really send you on your path. The majority of the information in this book I completely agree with. Timing, events on the palms, I don't completely agree with him on the things he said here, but I think every palmist has their own way of doing things. But he clearly demonstrates he has a great understanding of how to understand a person's abilities, their skills, their character, personality traits. He's very articulate, he's very eloquent, describes things with quite a rich vocabulary, puts things into he's quite easy to understand his language. And if you're a bit of a visual learner like myself, then this book will definitely help you. There's just so many case studies, puts things into context really nicely just on every page. And as I say, there's some really rare little images you're just not going to find online. Here's the palm print of Charles Manson and what his palm can show us. So well worth purchasing, well worth it. Now, number 5 is Practical Palmistry by David Brandon-Jones. It's just an exceptional book, and I've read it many times. I think the only bad thing I can say about this book is that David does tend to repeat himself in his books in terms of the hand printing process tends to be in all of his books. But other than that, this book is exceptional. There is information in all of his books which you just won't find in any other books. His understanding of Western palmistry in particular is, I think, better than anyone else's. It's neat and concise. It's got a lot of information in a short amount of time. It's very, very easy to read, and you will take a lot away from it. Lots of visual examples, lots of case studies. It's just a superb book. I highly, highly recommend Practical Palmistry. Many, many books have this title, by David Brandon-Jones. Now, number 4 is Beryl Hutchinson's Your Life in Your Hands, a modern guide to palmistry. Now, earlier I mentioned the SSPP, and I got it wrong. It's the Society for the Study of Psychological Patterns. Sounds much more scientific, doesn't it? Beryl Hutchinson's fascination with the study of hands began when she heard a member of the Chirological Society comment on the peculiar pattern found in the hands of so many of the young men who died in World War I. After World War II, she became a librarian at the International Institute for the Psychic Investigation and helped to found the Society for the Study of Psychological Patterns. So, unfortunately, Beryl completely understated palmist. Volunteered in World War I and II. Fascinating lady. She only ever wrote one book, and this is it. I highly, highly recommend this book. It's on the old side, certainly, like a lot of my favourite palmistry books, but it's still relevant. You can tell a lot of what she's saying is genuine because I've not seen the kind of information in this book that I've seen in other books, and from personal experience, I know what she is saying is true because I've put it into practice myself and it's not been wrong yet. There's lots of handy diagrams, and as I say, I've not seen this anywhere else, and it's all true as far as I can see. She goes into quite in depth into the bone structure as well. You can tell that this is a very scientific person. But it's not all just put down to, appear intelligent or knowledgeable. She puts it into the context that allows us to understand the palms better and how the information then can be translated into palmistry. The book itself is divided into 3 massive chapters, and under each of those chapters it breaks down the different areas of palmistry, and I love that about this book because so few books do that. It's got part 1 is chirognomy, massive chapter. Part 2 is dermatoglyphics, and then the chiromancy, which is obviously the chirology. And these are the 3 aspects of palmistry that, to truly understand a person and everything in their lives, who they are, and everything involved around it, you need to look at these 3 aspects of palmistry, and so she encompasses all of that into this book. There's lots of specific examples that you'll see in this book you won't see anywhere else. Deafness from childhood, throat infection example right here, and then she'll go on to say things like, I've seen this in 7 of 150 prints, which I carried out over a series of 1.5 months in this particular area, and it's all very scientific. She mentions Mir Bashir and how what he says relates to what they know, and she'll put it into a context and sort of say, well, this is said about this sign, however I've only seen it 7 times in my life, and just you can get that she's genuine, because she'll say, I don't fully trust what's been said because I don't have enough information, and not enough has been done yet in this particular area, and then she kind of moves on. So it's impartial, it's objective, and it's scientific. She was a true pioneer of modern Western scientific palmistry. Now then, number 3 is Fortune Telling by Palmistry by a chap called Rodney Davies. Rodney Davies has written a lot of books, and I don't think he was a palmist. I don't know. However, this book I've had since I was 15. I've had it for, 23 years? And it's an exceptional book. I really owe my fascination, my obsession, my everything I know about palmistry to Rodney Davies. Because if it wasn't for this book, I never would have begun the path of being a palmist. I was skeptical about palmistry when I first started learning at the age of 15. My mum actually showed me this book, and I wanted to challenge my own beliefs and learn a bit more about it before coming to a conclusion that it was all nonsense. So I decided to pick this book up and read it and put it to the test. And at the time, the information in this book, along with what I had discovered about a person's palms in relation to a particular isolated, indented, profound palmar marking that came and went within the space of a few days, and what that sign meant and what this book said about that sign, and how it was all true, it was just too much of a coincidence for me, and it set me down this path. In this book, it's extremely good for the fingers, and how there's information regarding how the fingers show us different months of the year as well, and no other book I've found has ever talked about that, and so that's just absolutely fascinating. It's got the wearing of the rings in this book. So few books in it. It's a hugely neglected area of palmistry. So many times have I referred to this book, the spine is now cracking, but you can see the months of the year here in the book. The different star signs each phalanx of each finger represents, and it shows a predictive system really in how to predict events using the months of the year on the fingers. It's very easy to understand, but it's also highly informative, and it's packed with information for such a small book. There's a lot here, and as I say, I've read it countless times throughout the years, and I still refer to it now every now and then. Terry also bigs this book up quite a bit as well, and there's a nice little neat section at the back about the fortunate signs and markings in the palms as well, which is A bit of a summary. It's not all that detailed, but for those who are learning and starting out, I highly recommend this book. Quite literally changed my life. Now, number 9 is this neat little book right here, Your Hand and Your Career by David Brandon-Jones. You can see 2 white guys, one older dude, one, not so older dude. I do wonder if it was printed in this day and age, if this would look completely different. This book has such a rich array of case studies in it, and the things that you can learn from each and every single one of these case studies is just phenomenal. It shows you the different types of hands and the types of people who have 3 different types of bank manager, artists, the communicator, a person who is emotionally wrecked, and it shows you all of the different types of the hand shapes, the elementary, the primary, the square, the spatula, the conic, the psychic, the 7 different types, the 6, and then the 1 mixed hand that Desiraboles, is that how you say it, and Darpentigny, the 2 French palmists came up with, and it shows you how we've come away from that kind of type of thinking, and it makes more sense now when the Fred guessing system of 4 has been, that's why it's more popular now, I think, really, is because the older system is not quite so relevant. But David Brandon-Jones actually has his own classification of palm types. He has his own system of 12 in practical palmistry. So if you get this book and this book, the pair together, you cannot go wrong. It's just phenomenal learning. This book has helped me understand a tremendous amount about palmistry and therefore people. David Brandon-Jones puts things into context so succinctly. He'll talk about an aspect of dermatoglyphics, chirognomy, and chirology. Just 3 signs, one of each from each area, and show how these 3 things point to one other sign or symptom. And that's just a remarkable way of understanding and showing how palmistry works. He has a gifted way of presenting the information. The only real downside to this book is just the language. I mean, it's kind of old. It's 1976, I think, and so it's slightly un-PC, I suppose, in terms of what we would deem in this day and age. But you can understand it for the time that it was written. But it's just still so relevant to this day. I cannot recommend this book enough. You'll probably get it for about £10 to £15. It's not the most common book around, but it's just particularly enlightening in terms of how to understand what something like potassium deficiency looks like in the palms, and how this affects us, how this can have knock-on effects on our psyche and our physiological aspects as well. And it's just it talks about things that no other palmistry book does in a way that no other palmistry book does. It's just phenomenal, fascinating. Highly recommend. Now, number 10, as you might imagine, it's this little book right here. And it's a book that I've plugged quite a few times. And I just want to mention, I make nothing from plugging books. I just want to help people learn palmistry. And reading is one of the best ways. Read a palm, read a book. Read a palm, read a book. Or read a chapter, read a palm. Just keep going from one to the other. And this for me is a way that I learn. I'm quite a visual learner, so I need to see and do. Now, 50 Case Studies in Modern Palmistry by T.Stokes. Again, quite literally changed my life. It changed my way of thinking about palmistry. Terry is a completely different palmist to any other in the world, in my opinion. Because Terry, when he was 7 years old, touched a person's hand and had all of these kind of images come to him. And he was found to just sort of have this natural gift to see a person's life in front of him when he touched a person's hand. And there were lots of his critics, other palmists, who kind of got a bit jealous even at a teenage boy who had this incredible gift and was far more talented than other palmists, 3 times his age, said that he knew nothing about the knowledge of it himself. So Terry went on a bit of a path and read, I don't know how many books, countless books. But he, like me, has only, a kind of a neat collection of 30 or so books, because most are just rehashes of other people's works. This book, again, it's fascinating because there are case studies of real life clients of obviously he's going to keep the confidential, he's going to keep them anonymous, but he puts these fascinating clients under the microscope. They're all so very different, and you learn such a tremendous amount from each and every single one. And he shows in great detail how the palm has allowed him to come to the conclusions that he has. I think the reason why this book is so significant is because it's pretty much his whole career confined into one book. A bit like Beryl Hutchinson, he's only ever written the one book, and this is why it's just so good. There are case studies of his former clients, but also famous people that he's read the hands of as well. Now, the best palmists out there will use numerology and astrology as well as palmistry to come to their conclusions, and will never diagnose from one sign or symptom alone when looking at palmistry or any other aspect. Terry has a remarkable way of using every tool at his disposal and talking about things with such accuracy. It's just mind-blowing. Terry is able to tell you what town you were born in, how much you weighed at birth, and even one of my subscribers mentioned that he had told them when they would get married, and he was off by about 1 week. Bear in mind, this was 10 years before the wedding. He read his palm. And I found T.Stokes online when I was about 17, 18, and I've been reading lots of articles by lots of palmists, and I found many people were just writing a lot of rubbish, and that was thankfully because the first book I read was excellent, that book by Rodney Davies. So I had a good understanding, I had a good frame of reference. When I came to reading what Terry was writing about palmistry, I thought, this guy's the real deal. So I recommended my friend have a reading done by T.Stokes, and my friend, he had was told things that just no one could possibly have known, that not even he knew, that his mother almost died during childbirth, that he moved when he was 4.5 years old. He didn't know these things, and Terry had identified these things purely from looking at the palms alone. And Terry, that way of working had he completely shaped the way palmistry worked in the 60s and 70s. He turned it on its head, because before then people were a lot more sort of vague, and it was very difficult to disprove that palmistry was fraudulent. Before Terry came along, Terry identified the palms of someone live. He identified, figured out someone, the actual identity of a person through their palm prints live on television in 1976, and that was James Hunt, the Formula One driver. And Terry became famous overnight as a result. And then he became subject to lots of sort of jealousy and nastiness from other palmists, writing into magazines, telling them that Terry was, a dinosaur, and that his ways were old, and that he was no good. And he would receive lots of nastiness, horrible letters and phone calls and things. So Terry decided to get away from it all. And even to this day, Terry still only charges £30 a reading. £30. Terry's trained people who charge £250 for a reading to this day. There's a chap in London who charges that much, who was trained by T.Stokes. I would never charge that much. In any case, like David Brandon-Jones, his former contemporary, I've learned a tremendous amount from these two books. I really have. It's these two, Practical Palmistry and Fortune Telling by Palmistry by Rodney Davies as well. Just exceptional books. If you would like to learn palmistry, buy these books. I highly, highly recommend. As I say, I don't make any money from plugging these books. I just want to help people learn as I have. So I'm in the process of writing my own book. What I will bring to palmistry, I hope I can bring something to it that hasn't already been written. That's my aim. Like some of the books I've mentioned here, I'd like to gather a bit more before I put it out there. But I am in the process of writing one, and I'm enjoying it. So let me know what your thoughts are on the books I've mentioned. Perhaps you've never heard of any of these. Perhaps you've got a few of them. Perhaps you've got a book that you really think is an exceptional read and has changed the way that you think about palmistry. Let me know what your thoughts are. And I hope that this little top 10 has been helpful. Thanks for watching.